Hi, this is Shadi, and today we're discussing leg locks. Leg locks are indeed a fascinating topic. So many people for it, so many people against it, so many controversies surrounding this subject, and yet it has not been an easy road for leg locks all throughout the decades, for evolvement, for finding its way into submission grappling, jiu-jitsu, and even trying to make its way into MMA, because so many people are just simply against it for multiple reasons. But leg locks have been around since the antiquities, from the days of the mythical centaur up until recent history with Sadakazu Uyenishi, Yukio Tani, and of course Mitsuyo Maeda, all versed in leg locks. So we're gonna find out that history truly repeats itself. So the first story against leg locks was back in 1899. It was in Kyoto, Japan. It was a fight between third degree black belt judoka Yuji Hiruka against Fozen Ryu master Matayamon Tanabe. Tanabe pulls guard and applies what is called the Ashi Garami and breaks Hiruka's leg, and everyone was outraged. Everyone wanted the ban of leg locks, including and especially the founder of Kodokan Judo, Jigoro Kano, saying they were too dangerous, and back then ACL surgeries were not a thing. So fast forward to 1916, and the Kodokan officially bans the Ashigarami from being done in randori, and that was the first nail in the coffin of leg locks in judo. Fast forward 5 years later, and it was at the peak of the rivalry between Kanemitsu Yaichioe and Tsunetane Oda. Tsunetane Oda's team have been reigning champions for years, and Kanemitsu was looking to dethrone him. So in 1921, he invents two techniques in order to get the job done: the triangle choke and the knee bar. So the moment his student applies the knee bar and the team tournament, everyone was once again outraged and wanted the ban of leg locks or the particular knee bar, because it was a lot like Ashigarami, targeting the knee. So fast forward 1 year later, and the Kodokan had their infamous meeting, and they decided to ban all leg locks. 98 years ago, the ghosts of these men still affect judo till this day with their decision. But leg locks have not died out completely on that day, because Japanese judokas and masters like Takeo Yano and Gyoji or Jeo Omori made their way to Brazil and kept them pretty much alive, especially Takeo Yano teaching the heel hook to Carlos Gracie and Ivan Gomez, while Jeo Omori teaching Oswaldo Fadda all sorts of leg locks. Now, want to know how history repeats itself? It was 1955, decades later after the ban of the Kodokan and all the outrages, and it was Team Gracie versus Team Fadda, 14 versus 14, very much like a Kozen Judo tournament, and surrounding so many controversies and accounts, newspapers saying the Gracies won the first one, while Hela saying Fadda emerged victorious. But in 1956, just 1 year later, everyone unanimously knows that Fadda family won by using the leg locks. But every time someone from the Fadda team applies a leg lock, the Gracie crowd would yell Zapatero. Zapatero means shoemaker. It was like a derogatory slur in order to really undermine them from being from a different economical class and also resorting to cheap tactics. Shoemakers were not wealthy people, and so they were mainly putting the idea of being poor and also using cheap tactics and leg locks together, and thus the stigma of leg lock took on a new meaning. Now it's socio-economical as well, not only just dangerous or it doesn't work, but now it's synonymous with the poor people. And believe me, this idea did not die out very quickly. Fast forward 40 years later, in the mid 1990s, and young Eddie Bravo was competing in the Pan American Games. and then applies a leg lock, and a Brazilian crowd starts throwing shoes at him. Very symbolic, very reminiscent of what happened in the 50s, and this is what he had to say about it.
All the Brazilians started throwing. There was almost a riot. They called the cops. They were throwing shoes at me. And Johnny Machado, I'll never forget him running in slow motion, sliding. And I had the toe hold, and Johnny goes, "You gotta let it go. You gotta let." So I had the toe hold, and I'm looking around, so I let it go. People are throwing shoes at me and water bottles and stuff. It was like a big deal. And
now, fast forward to the 2000s, and a fateful meeting happened between Renzo Gracie student John Danaher and Dean Lister, and Dean uttered the famous words, "Why would you ignore 50% of the body?" And that has changed everything. John embarked on this journey in order to solidify leg locks and to make them into the system they are today, a bulletproof system going from point A to point B, and showing everyone that leg locks are not for those who cannot pass guard, and they're not for those who don't have skills in jiu-jitsu, beating every argument on the table and making leg locks a phenomenon that they are today, especially with his death squad that has took the world of no-gi jiu-jitsu by storm. So much so that the IBJJF has succumbed to it, and now in 2021 IBJJF will allow heel hooks for brown and black belts in the no-gi division. Even in MMA, we are starting to find strategies around leg locks, making them far more successful in the octagon. Many legends of the past has tried to do leg locks in MMA, but suffered greatly due to the high risk. Legends like Yuki Nakai, but now it is becoming far more successful to do leg locks in MMA. So this is mainly the story of how leg locks in jiu-jitsu not only stood against all the arguments and all the stigma, but also thrived into what they are today. So another place where judo's leg locks survived is in Russia with Vasily Oschepkov and Sambo. Sambo still hold their leg locks very seriously. The game around it is very picturesque and very skilled, but it is somewhat limited. They have limits against torsions, meaning toe holds and also heel hooks, because it might rip out the ligaments, because if I'm not mistaken, ligaments or ACL surgeries were not a thing back in those days. So it was very empathetic and sympathetic of Kano and Oschepkov to limit or even ban leg locks at the time, but times are changing. We have far more options. We have far more evolved medicine. So now it's time to work more on leg locks. And finally, the fourth horseman of the grappling four horsemen, it is catch as catch can. Leg locks have been there since day one. You can see it being documented with legends like Ad Sintel here demonstrating the leg lock, and also having their own signature locks like shin locks. But I'm not a catch wrestling expert, but with the evolution of both jiu-jitsu and catch and the evolution of their relationship together, it has become somewhat of a melting pot, giving and taking from each other. But you can still see the relationship or the signature of each art somewhat apparent, but it has become a give or take relationship, especially in Brazil with luta livre, and also when catch wrestlers compete either in ADCC or any other tournaments like Kazushi Sakuraba and many others. So the history of leg locks is incredibly vast and somewhat of an up and down, especially in arts like judo and jiu-jitsu. Judo took a big hit back in 1922, but luckily Takeo Yano and Jeo Omori kept it pretty much alive, and those teachings are those that survived. So we are very thankful for these masters that kept it alive, like Yano with the heel hook. You have Jeo Omori teaching the Fadda family their leg locks. So if you have anything else to add, let me know. This was Shadi, and thank you for listening.